the book should not be sworn by its cover, this is precisely the case with Breath of Fire 3. Unfortunately, American and later European marketing concentrated on having a competition among themselves. Who would be able to make the ugliest cover? There is no winner in the sense that this cover here is embarrassing because it tells you nothing about the game. An explosion, some fire with a sword, nice. You look at the back of it, yeah, 2 sprites, no big deal. The European version was even worse. The artwork was not the official artwork at all. Only the Japanese version got it right with the cover. 26 years after its release, I can tell you that it is one of the best RPGs that was ever made. It had the misfortune of coming out shortly after Final Fantasy VII. In Japan, it came out in 1997, while Final Fantasy VII came out in 96. So it came between Final Fantasy VII and Xenogears. It had the bad luck to come out between the 2 best Japanese RPGs in history, let's say, without wanting to go into details. Poor guy was there in the middle, so at the time he couldn't shine. Breath of Fire 3 is one of the best games in history, and today I am here to explain why.
Rank is me.
As with Xenogears, it made extensive use of 3-dimensional scenery with hand-rendered characters. The level of animation of the sprites in Breath of Fire 3 is incredible. Capcom was a master of sprite animation. It disadvantaged so many animations that in some cases, some animations were made to be used only once. Between the explosion of colors, the detail of the sprites, and the environments that were yes in 3D, it almost looked hand-drawn. This, combined with the music, made Breath of Fire the most beautiful fairy tale one could wish for. There were even plans to make an opening anime, which then in the end, due to time issues, was never finalized, which was partly used as a commercial for the Japanese version. Breath of Fire 3 takes everything that Breath of Fire 2 was, which was a great role-playing game, and elevates it to improved everything. In the first few minutes of Breath of Fire 2, you controlled child Ryu in a dream. Soon after, Ryu woke up and was an adult. In the case of Breath of Fire 3, they took this back and did it beautifully. For half the game we have Baby Ryu, and Baby Ryu means that he is a child. It means that in the early stages of the game, when he attacks with the sword, he covers his eyes, turns his head, and attacks blindly. Ryu was a child who was also looking for a father figure and found it in Rei and Tipo, and also in Bunyan, the woodsman, who was not only a woodsman, he was also a good teacher. In the middle of the game, guys, a really unexpected plot twist will happen, after which there will be a time skip of about a decade, and we will find Ryu grown up, Ryu who has now become an adult, and when he attacks now, looks proudly into the eyes of the enemy and shouts a loud chai when he mows you down with his sword. We will find Nina again, who has grown from a tender little girl into a beautiful young lady. Breath of Fire 3, in chronological order of the saga, is basically the last chapter. Breath of Fire 4 is the very first, then there was Breath of Fire I and the 2, and then the lore wants Breath of Fire the 3rd as the final chapter. In Breath of Fire 3, the Brood, the man-dragon race, have been exterminated completely in a kind of war that was waged hundreds and hundreds of years before. In the mural in the introduction, you see the party from Breath of Fire 1 fighting her. It is her such and such. So Ryu is found in this crystal pyramid by miners. They were mining in this mine full of dragon fossils. The first thing these miners think is to sell him because it was so rare to find a baby dragon. There, maybe the recurring theme of Breath of Fire 3 is that you can't rely on your neighbor. It also teaches you that you should never generalize. It teaches you just that in reality, there will be few but good ones that you can trust. Newly captured Ryu is put on a train in a cage, sent who knows where. With his last gathered strength, he manages to push the cage off the train and ends up unconscious in a forest. In this forest, he was about to be mauled by wolves, but he is rescued by Rei and Tipo, 2 young boys who live in a small house in a nearby forest, living the gimmicks. They take care of Ryu, however. At the same time, they also set the wrong example for him. After 2 or 3 attempts to rob the wrong people, they rob the wrong person, the squire of the village, the lord. Clearly, boys, this was the mistake that will then set the whole story in motion. Along come these two goons, Baglio and Sander, two horsemen, tall, muscular, mean, kind of stupid but mean. The three kids have no hope of being able to fight two professional adult goons. The key is kids versus adults. Therefore, nothing, they are defeated, the house is burned at the stake. Ryu, when he wakes up, sees no trace of either Rei or Tipo, his two big brothers, and sets out on their trail, hoping they are not dead. From here, he will then meet Nina, he will meet Momo, he will meet Peko, he will meet Garr, but most of all, he will meet, yes, many people who will try to make fun of him, who will try to deceive him, but he will actually find some people who will help him as well. Ryu's trust in others is enviable. Anyone in his place would have succumbed to cynicism and started thinking only for himself, but not Ryu. This thing, guys, I swear, as I tell you, I have chills inside because the story does not revolve around saving the world. There will be so many adventures in store for Ryu and his friends, and they are so well written that there is no need to think about Holocaust's end of the world. The Ryu of Breath of Fire 3 is a normal boy who simply wants to live quietly, wants to live peacefully. To save every once in a while, you can go to this camp, and in the boys' camp, you talk, you discuss. With your friends, you'll talk, you'll find out a lot of things. It pushes you to socialize with your companions, with your party members, and every time, depending on the parts of the game where you'll be, they'll tell you new things. This is a ploy to deepen your party members so much should you want to. When I was playing Breath of Fire 3, I wasn't counting the hours of play, I was hoping the game would never end. Breath of Fire 3 is a masterpiece because it has an amazing battle system, and several games then have been inspired now. As it is clear by now, Ryu is a dragon man and this gives him access to the dragon transformation. However, normally a brood can transform into only one type of dragon, and Ryu is no different. He too can transform into a dragon. Clearly, initially, the only transformation available to him will be that of Will, in the sense that he is a baby, a little boy, cuddly, little baby, and he cannot fully utilize his powers. And the story makes you realize that he is limited, because several times he will be defeated by his enemies. And that is the beauty of the story as well. As we go around, either around the dungeons or around the map, we will see these purple crystallized nuggets that contain crystallized brood essence inside. And when you discover a nugget of these, you can assimilate it. Inside there is a dragon gene, and you will have access to a new dragon power. Ryu can decide to fuse together up to 3 different dragon genes, and this will very often give rise to a new dragon form different from the others. Plus, there is also just the fusion gene that allows you to fuse with 2 of your party members, and it will generate a dragon, usually a very large one, that is the fusion of all 3 Ryu characters together with his 2 party members. It was a revolutionary battle system. It was beautiful, super tactical, super fun. In addition to that, however, there is also the Master System. No, I'm not talking about the Master System, I'm talking about the Master System. Stretching our eye a little bit on Ikoden, around the map, around the world, we will encounter these characters with unique sprites who ideally might even fight alongside us, but they are masters. Ryu is not the Tenkai star, so Ryu cannot recruit 108 characters. However, these masters will sometimes offer themselves based on certain requirements, just like recruiting Destiny stars, to teach Ryu and his party members. What benefits were there from the master system? There was a modulator of level up, and based on the master under whom you were learning, some stats maybe were +1, +2, and other stats were +-1, -2. Depending on which master we were training under, he would also teach us skills. These unique skills, it was possible then to eventually equip them to any character. So then the nice thing was that each character maybe had deficiencies in their skill set. You could make up for it by using the skills learned by the masters. There was also a system to learn skills by observing enemies. Enemy skills, like in Final Fantasy VII, however without equipping anything. In the combat menu, there was the little icon with an eye that allowed you to skip a turn to observe the skill and the skill that the enemy was using. Sometimes you could learn these skills. It was very time consuming. Plus, guys, there were lots of mini games present. Fishing that also allowed you to get some of the best equipment in the game. The fairy village was a kind of management game where you had to take care of these fairies. Then as you leveled up this fairy village, you had more and more better items. But the times, guys, there were really nice items. Besides that, some of the best equipment in the game you could only steal from monsters. The very famous Gooking sword comes to mind. In the final dungeon, you would meet the Gooking, who were basically the equivalent of the metal slug from Dragon Quest. They too would flee almost immediately. They too would give you so much experience if you killed them, but you had a 1 in 256 chance that they would drop the Gooking sword. It was the strongest sword in the game. The exploration of the dungeons in Breath of Fire 3 was very nice because very often there were puzzles that required physical action from the characters. Each character had the ability to use certain things. To say, Momo used her cannon, Ryu used his sword, Nina used magic. This was actually already present in both Breath of Fire 1 and Breath of Fire 2. This, let's say, could make the dungeons sometimes frustrating and sometimes fun. Now guys, it's time for a little spoiler, so those who don't want spoilers, go ahead a little bit. But guys, you who are watching already know what I am talking about. I am talking about the moment when grown Ryu meets Rei again. How happy were you guys? Guys, still now, if I think about it, my eyes glaze over and I get even more glazed over thinking back to Rei and Ryu's amazement when they meet grown-up Tipo and try hard to convince him to come with them, but it's too late now. Tipo has been brainwashed by Miria over the course of a decade. He is totally cyclically convinced that Miria is the one and only true goddess and who she does what to preserve the world. Like is aware that he is a dark dragon and is aware that dragons are a threat to humanity. He is the first to say, no, Ryu, you and I are too powerful to be at loose ends. We are stray nukes. To remember, guys, that Death Desert basically is half the world that was reduced to a nuclear holocaust in the war between Miria and the dragons. It was Miria who decided to destroy the dragons, though, because it was Miria who was shitting herself. The dragons were quietly minding their own business. Like when he meets us, he's different, he's changed. Even Rei almost doesn't even consider him. I mean, Rei, who was his big brother, Rei, who took care of him, he doesn't look at him. Rei is invisible to him, like he only has eyes for Ryu because he was an equal, because he was also a kind of demigod. By now he kind of saw mortals as little ants. And unfortunately, guys, I tried them all. I cried when I had to kill Tipo. I didn't want to kill Tipo. I love Tipo. Tipo's death for me is worse than the death of Gremio and the death of Iris. I felt terrible about it. But most of all, my friends, the first time I played it, I didn't realize it. It took me a second run to notice it. When Ryu is found in the forest as a child by Rei and Tipo and passed out, he is taken to their house. He has a dream. And in that dream, adult Tipo appears to him. Adult Tipo appears to him and talks to him. And right after that, Miria appears. I mean, guys, can you believe this? This thing here opened up room for so many theories. Time loops. Why? For what fucking reason does Ryu dream adult type? Or rather, why does adult type get to dream? So he travels through time with his mind and projects his image into Ryu's mind as a child. Garr is the emblem that one can be wrong, and that sometimes changing one's mind is neither weak nor stupid, it is smart. Because Garr in the first part of the game just blindly carries out what he was commanded by his goddess without opening his eyes. And then, however, his conscience takes over. His superego makes him realize that he has done something wrong, taking it like a child who has done nothing to you. Who would take it like a child? I'm a coward, and Garr understands that. And so he seeks redemption, and when he finds Ryu, he asks him for forgiveness. And Ryu, after all he's been through between Palmer and Bayo and Sander and company anyway, he decides to forgive Garr. And Garr becomes his most loyal follower. He becomes her guardian. Because Garr, after all, was a guardian. He had actually lost his way, though. He had barred the way. Or maybe he never had the way. Until he met Ryu, however. Not to mention Ryu's most beautiful transformation ever, the Kaiser. Kaiser Dragon. Infinity, by the way, was Ryu's ultimate power from Breath of Fire 2. Given that Ryu goes around collecting souls of deceased dragons, if anything, Infinity was probably passed on to him by Ryu of Breath of Fire 2 itself. As Ryu transforms into Kaiser and is seen with bursts of energy and aura that makes him become Super Saiyan, you guys tell me you didn't get excited. Tell me you didn't get excited. The soundtrack of Breath of Fire 3 is a mix of blues, jazz, rock. It is a soundtrack that still gives me so many emotions when I listen to it. In my opinion, it has aged well compared to most of the watered-down games that they propagate for us today. Breath of Fire 3 is a game with intense flavor from start to finish. If you enjoyed the video, I simply ask you to like and subscribe to Frankie's Lair. See you at the next one. Abayo!